Let me open by saying a few months ago, I attended one of the most exciting, invigorating, stimulating workshops I've ever attended. It was called Anatomy of a Hit. I had heard about Fernando Garibay, but didn't know a lot about him. Certainly hadn't met him, but he led this session. And I think I ended up attending another session afterwards. And this session was organized by Valerie Shepard, who's not only a big music aficionado, but also the chair of Cintrifuse. And I think we're in for a fantastic session today. It's very deliberate that we're doing this as a multi-part series. We believe this topic is critically important, especially now. I think this also affords us an opportunity to, deepen a relationship with Valerie and Fernando over time. There may be an incredible question or provocation that, suddenly hits you over the 4th of July weekend that you want to bring back to the next conversation. So think about how you might, think about this as a bit of a journey, but we're going to, kick it off with our first session. And I'm going to allow both Valerie and Fernando to just say a little bit about their backgrounds, because they bring a really, really unique blend to the table. But I am absolutely thrilled to participate. I'll jump in here and there, but I'll generally kind of sit in the back while the two real experts highlight, go into this very, very important topic. So without further ado, let me start by asking Valerie, who will be the primary moderator. Just Valerie, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you're linked to Cintrifuse, and what the audience should know.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Too bad we can't be all in the same room, but this is a way we can connect and scale and keep each other safe, and hope all of you are safe as well. So let's see a little bit about me. So I'm the board chair for Cintrifuse. I work at P&G. I'm the treasurer and controller, and I've also been leading a company transition, a reorganization of the Procter & Gamble company. Hopefully you guys know P&G. If you don't know P&G, you know our brands like Downy and Bounce and Charmin and Pantene and Olay and Gillette, and I could go on and on. I can tell the two gentlemen with me on the call use a lot of P&G products because they're very well groomed. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. The yay, P&G white laundry soap. The first brand. So
one of the first brands there.
I agree.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
The first brand. Actually, we sold candles and soap. Two gentlemen married sisters, and they had a very smart father-in-law who said, you guys should go into business together. So that's how Procter & Gamble formed over 180 years ago. And as a treasurer, I manage the money for the company all over the globe. As a controller, I sign off on the accounting books. And also as treasurer, I have global business development. And that means that I spend time looking for new ideas and new technologies to come into our company to solve our problems. So that's my day job. My other day job is I'm a mother and wife of 3 musicians. And so I have a very noisy household. I've told them to keep the piano playing down and so forth for today. So you won't hear them today. But that is also a separate passion and fascination for me, and how that business works. And it's a tough business, as you all know. And actually, as great as connections collide, right? So I'm at a Cintrifuse board. I meet a gentleman named Joe Keurigs from Generator, who runs the Brandery Accelerator. And we get in a conversation. He happens to meet Fernando through some music acceleration. Accelerators that he's putting on across the country. And then lo and behold, I get this phone call and said, would you be willing to host Fernando and his band? And of course, I jumped at the chance. That was about a year ago. And we've developed a deep friendship and respect as colleagues. And I'm kind of trying to do my part to help all in the music industry, because it's a tough time. And Fernando is all about helping everyone, frankly. And I think we'll get the benefit of his experience and his self-education on the topic of empathy. And Fernando, I'm really super duper appreciative of you taking the time to invest in Cincinnati once again, both today and the next 3 webinars you've agreed we've somehow convinced you to do. And of course, once the pandemic is over, hopefully back here in our dirt where we can all be in the same room together. But Fernando, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you are?
Well, thank you, Valerie. It's very kind of you. I'm always not only impressed by a resume, as I keep hearing something, I always find something new, as I know you as a friend, as opposed to more of a business colleague. But nonetheless, you're exemplary in your leadership. And as I've gotten to know you and your work with Procter & Gamble and Cintrifuse, I realize what an impact you've been making just merely by your presence and your understanding of constantly learning and pushing the envelope to what is leadership and how it's driven by empathy. I can tell immediately when I first met you that you have all the signals of what is required to move a company like P&G into or facilitate the process of changing the culture within a huge behemoth like P&G. Now, P&G is a great case study because it's known as a force for good now, right? Mm-hmm. And originally, I won't get too far into this, but it's so fascinating to me because as the biggest ad spender in the world, right, there's this huge responsibility for a company like P&G to facilitate the next evolution of what marketing is, right, to help people as opposed to hinder, right? And that's the big difference. This is what's exciting about your work, Valerie, and Phil, Duncan, and Mark Pritchard. The whole team over there has been fantastic in listening and allowing our version of the music industry to have a new opportunity to share collective experiences, working each other to educate each other on each other's businesses so that we may help more musicians.
Okay, tell us your story, because your resume and what you've done, I know is going to be of, the work you put out has moved the world. So why don't you tell us about it?
Sure. It all came from a desperate need when I was young. I realized that, I felt a strong connection. I think I felt music understood me, and I saw it as more anthropomorphic in a way that music was my best friend, music was my family member, music was everything I never really felt I had. And so in my emotional self-disenfranchisement version of, my ego, I was like, I want to dedicate the rest of my life to making other people feel the way music makes me feel so that I may alleviate their pain. Mm-hmm. And that high level of understanding of, and again, it comes back to empathy. I didn't know the words for this. I didn't know that I was too set on the mission to do this, but this was my cause and my calling. That driving force led me, from the age of like 6, 7, 8, 9, I was already working, teaching as many students as I could. I was trading my skills as a drummer to learn piano. So I had all these hacks I was doing just to get ahead or have a shot at an opportunity like making music for a living. At the time, I didn't know there was such a career, right? I just thought that people kind of fell into it, or I knew someone that gave them a shot, or you were born into it. I had no idea. I grew up in South Central LA, Southeast LA, and there was no real push towards the arts, push towards a different divergent-esque career, so to speak. So long story short, I met incredible mentors very early on. Georgia Moroder was one, David Foster, great artists like Enrique Iglesias, who gave me one of my first opportunities to work. And this is very early on, I don't know, my early teen years. And submitting demos to some of the record labels that I was a big fan of. So I would borrow studios, I would borrow equipment. I just did what I thought they wanted to hear that was genuine to me. And at the time, house music, electronic dance music was really big. So I realized I can understand and really connect with the music. So I started making demos. I sent them out, and alongside meeting extraordinary people and extraordinary people giving me an opportunity and extraordinary mentors, that collaboration led me to have an opportunity with Interscope, in which I then met Jimmy Iovine, and Jimmy Iovine took me under his wing alongside the executive staff at Interscope, including Martin Crusenbaum and Neil Jacobson, which I owe both of them a huge gratitude. So these mentors have allowed me the opportunity to flourish in such a difficult business. And I think that, having mentors and having mentors that care are critical to success.
So tell us a little bit about really just how you're doing. You're living in LA. Times are crazy there with COVID spiking. There's a lot of issues with not being able to produce music right now. So how are you and your tribe doing?
It's a great question. Let's just jump right in. I realized, so I consider myself, pretty mentally fit. I work really hard at staying true to the needs of the people around me and my personal awareness of myself. So to answer your question, there's dips. I realize, sometimes I feel more sluggish than other times. And that's really rare for me because I'm constantly on the go. I'm constantly looking at how I can make an impact and how I can help more people. That's my driving force. That's my kind of north compass, true north, so to speak, Brene Brown-esque type of vernacular. And if I'm, having these dips, I could only imagine individuals who are not as mentally fit or aware or acute of their needs. And I realized, I come from a legacy of humility, right? I have generations. My dad, my mom were farmers. I don't have the legacy education of, hey, I'm going to go out and sell what I'm doing. I'm going to go out and promote my brand. I'm going to go out and promote this. But what pushed me to talk about this more is I'm well versed and I'm able to help people make a change in themselves in order to help more people change and inspire growth in themselves, right? So it's catalytic. So in a nutshell, I'm doing well significantly, but I'm doing better because I get to do this.
Right.
And I get to share the years of research I've done alongside with artists. I work with everybody. Like, I'm fortunate, Gaga, Britney Spears, U2, Rihanna now, Taliawe, Post Malone's protege. We're Sia, who's been incredible. Shakira, these wonderful leaders, women leaders who made an impact in society and made an impact in their music, have taught me more about empathy than mere experience.
So one of the things you and I have talked about a couple of times is empathy and culture and leadership and why they all go together. And one of the things that I remember that you taught me was the importance of having sort of a culture of extreme kindness, which gets into empathy. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about why empathy? Why should we spend, 4 different sessions talking about empathy, and why is that so important, do you think, from a leadership and output standpoint?
So let me just paint a picture of my world, and to answer this question. I sit here with an average of 8 hours minimum a day of research, and 300 books a year that I and case studies and working papers. Why the obsession? It's because I realized that when I started getting into the neuroscience and behavior economics, neuroeconomics of how the brain functions and how what are the sociological repercussions of our brain altitude, I felt more compelled to share what I've learned because it's helped me become a better individual and a more impactful individual and more, I haven't found this much fulfillment in what I do compared to my previous primary focus in music. There's nothing that compares to helping people.
Yeah.
It's kind of like music was a vehicle to get to this point, and music is still a great vehicle, a beautiful artistic vehicle that coincides with what I do every day.
Right.
So I think that in order to make better music, I've realized I need to understand where this comes from. You know, I had a career, and this is the self-serving part, because we all need to serve ourselves to help others, right? And the self-serving part of my creativity and my career has come from, I need to make the most extraordinary music that can move people, right? I want my music to feel like a hug to the people that need a hug. I want my music to inspire their first kiss. I want my music to inspire freedom. I want my music to inspire, with the artists that I collaborate, the loudest voices I can work with, to have change, immediate change. So when they hear a song, they're moved to action. When they hear one of our songs, they feel like they're not alone. So then I realized, wow, I was able to do that with someone like Lady Gaga. What can I do to respect that accomplishment and to further help people more directly? And so around 2012, we did Born This Way, Lady Gaga. This is incredible success. I'm at the mountaintop, and I realized, holy cow, what do I do from here? We get, these incredible calls of gratitude and respect from, I'm not going to drop names, but it's pretty incredible. I mean,
Right.
I'm sitting there at this mountaintop, and one, it's really lonely, right? Because, Grammys won't keep you warm at night, right? But two, it's kind of, it's a bit, I can say this because I've done that, right? Like I'm biased because I had success, but that's the level of empathy you need to understand or try to begin to comprehend, that it's not just a simple idea of like, I need to feel what others are feeling in order, or understand other people's world to be more creative, so I can write stories, right? A fuel source. But it's more empathy is all encompassing. It is an empathy towards ourselves, right? That we must start with. In other words, what are my needs? Because if I don't have the respect or the care, the self-appreciation to first look at my needs as a human being, I cannot help others.
Right.
Right. There's a big disconnect and a big
And you
myth.
can't lead others either. Right?
100%. 100%. There's this myth, right? A lot of people, there's this habit of helping others before you help yourself first. And that's completely incorrect when it comes to behavioral economics and economics version of this, right? In order for optimum performance, it's first looking at your inner needs, so you may have a formidable foundation, right? So you may better help others. If your house has a loose foundation, it's going to eventually collapse. And that happened to me because I was under working with these extraordinary artists. It's extraordinary pressure. How could you never want to let people down? The fans, the people who truly live by the gospel of these artists. And so that pressure for me was a true telltale of how unprepared I was emotionally and mentally to deal with that level of success.
So how do you think that translates into other avenues, Fernando? So you can see it in a song, right? Because you
Sure.
feel, right? And you have to know what others feel in a song. How do you see that translate to entrepreneurs, to business leaders, to high school students, some of which who
Sure.
have joined us today? Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, guide me through this, Valerie, because I'm going to shoot quickly. There's a lot to touch on this. When you look at business and corporate structure of leadership, traditional leadership, management, you see, or I see, or even the startup community, there's this direct pollination of ideas, right? There's this intersect, this orthogonal connection. In other words, when you have a hit, how a record or song moves to the marketplace and connects with human beings, the success of that connection is called a hit.
Right.
Now, that is very similar to having a hit with the brand. That's very similar model to having a hit with an idea, intellectual property, and it's very similar to a startup, a new company coming and having a hit product. Or an entrepreneurial is having star leadership, right? So it's, if we look at how the mechanics of having hits, right, what happens with the human connection on that part, it directly aligns. And this is important to understand, because empathy, again, is bigger than the simple idea that it just resides in the neuroevolutionary psychology, behavioral sciences aspect. It's more encompassing than that. It touches everything we do, right? And it's particularly leadership and creativity. So I think that in high school students particularly, okay, if I'm going to touch on my empathy, my empathic skills, to feel what I felt. I skipped high school, but I know what humble brag, but I know what I felt when I saw other high school students, going to prom, or fellow students who were literally starving. Like they didn't have support from family. They didn't have a good nutritional balance throughout their day. So I was and we're in gangs, we're in you name it, all walks of life. And I remember I kept in touch with my neighborhood and my friends, and I remember that feeling. And I remember that when we all heard a certain type of song, all that was gone, right? And I didn't speak their vernacular, so to speak, but the human aspect of what they felt, it was what I was feeling. I knew that when I heard, Depeche Mode, Morrissey, or Led Zeppelin, or Pink Floyd, and we all listened to that music, and Dr. Dre's music, NWA, and these records were universal, right? And so that empathic connection started with this bridge with music. It's like this universal language, just like mathematics.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that connection started this, that bridge to connect. We were no longer different. Like at that moment, we heard that music in those house parties and those environments, and we were like, I mean, there was no separation.
Right.
We're the same.
So so it's clear the passion you have for imparting the importance of empathy to all walks of life, to people, right? Because empathy means being able to connect. And you talked a little bit about starting with yourself first. And then I know you have a model that talks about us, you first, and then us, and then now. So can you move a little bit into, so what should we go do? And how do we get some of the passion for empathy that you have, and how do we start exercising this muscle?
Okay, so first thing I think the most important, one of the most important starting points is the Z generation, the next generation, right? To come into a massive influence. And so for high school students, the first thing I want to say is, when you look at the person next to you, know that they're going through similar struggles that you are. When you adopt this idea, or I could even go as far as to say, know that the person next to you is just as afraid, if not more afraid, to start a conversation. when you apply these micro changes and these micro nudges and adopt these little, I call them, it's why psychological interventions, but in basic English, it's these micro nudges of ideas, and incorporate them in your day, right? Constantly reminding yourself, when you're nervous to have a conversation or when you're nervous to approach someone, know that they're probably more nervous than you are because you've already started the process of connection, right? So that's one piece of advice, and this is my side anecdote, is if I had a chance to do it again, I would adopt this mindset that we're all afraid. And that's very normal. And that's important. It's good to be
And that
afraid.
lasts through your whole life.
That's right. Yeah. So Alfred Adler, right, the father of imposter syndrome and superiority syndrome, which led to Charles Duhigg and the studies in habit formation, said this, that we're all afraid, and we all really are wired for that, and that's okay. And that's not a fault; it's a feature, right? And it's extraordinary. It's a great marker to know that your brain is working the way it should, right? And when you start and we talk about starting points, right? So what do you actually take? Well, the first one, let me answer 2 questions that I'm going to propose. One is, are we wired for empathy? 2, what is perspective shifting and reframing?
Okay.
So are we wired for empathy? Well, according to evolutionary psychology and evolutionary neuroscience, it's 50-50, right? So we are pre-wired and come with this, native system software, so to speak. And it's a crude over analysis, but we come into being understanding that when we see as babies a smile, we start to understand that's a good sign intuitively. When we, as children, when we start to see someone sad, by 2 years old, we want to console them, right? So yes, we are pre-wired, but with anything else, you are pre-wired to have a certain muscle mass, right? So in the same way, it must be worked on, right? So think of it as let's start with a crude number of 50%, 50%, right? 50% evolutionary and 50% environmental. Now, when you look at the environmental aspect, it's your opportunity to work out that part of your brain, right? Multiple parts of those connections. That's empathy. The more you connect with people, the more you connect with yourself, the more effective you become as using that cognitive process as a function of performance. So the second point, what is perspective shifting, and how does that relate to empathy? Well, this is really critical. The idea of Daniel Kahneman's Nobel Prize winning Thinking Fast and Slow behavioral economic models postulated that the term fundamental attribution error, I want everyone to look this up because it's really important, is the idea that we fundamentally make an attribution, in other words, predict the reason why someone does something based on our knowledge and our life experiences. I'm going to give you a simple example of this. And this is a big error. That's what it's called, an error. And it's a common error we make. When we're driving and someone cuts us off, we immediately go to the worst. What a, a-hole. What a, how selfish, these people should not be allowed to drive, etc. But we might not be able to see, and we know for sure we can't see the full picture. So what if this individual's driving his wife or whomever to the hospital to deliver a baby, right? That changes everything, doesn't it?
Right.
All of a sudden, if you reframe this by being aware that this is an error your brain's making, and you reframe it, in other words, think of it as rewrite the story for this very moment and say, wait, I have to be conscious. Maybe this individual is struggling through something. Maybe they're escaping something. Maybe they're taking someone to the hospital. By reframing this, how could you be upset? Right? Engage that compassion. And what's happening when you do this reframing, with Sean Aker, a positive psychology expert, Harvard Business School, has this term, perspective shifting. And it's the idea to make this wise psychological intervention. Intervene, rewrite the story. Because as soon as you do that, this part of your brain here that's responsible, orbital prefrontal cortex, or just plainly prefrontal cortex, aligns with your limbic system. That means your emotional center of your brain. And when this happens, when you engage the system, you become immediately more creative, obviously more empathic, but more aware of your environment. When you become hyper aware of your environment, the emotional landscape of your environment, that means the people around you, what they're feeling, you can influence more effectively to lead. So I know, Valerie, from your experience, we have these talks before, but you can now guess where this is going. It's how did I learn this? How did I pick this up through experience, not just the academic side? And it was the desperate need for me to deliver the message of the artist. I would get artists, and I still do to this day, I balance my time between the research and speaking and lecturing on this very topic and creativity equally with, creating records and mentoring my amazing team of producers and songwriters and artists. And what I realized is working with, these major artists is creativity and output is highly driven by trauma. Now, this is crazy because people think that, one, you have to suffer for your art. Two, that you have to have extreme trauma, but trauma comes in different forms. And in order to have an artist perform at their best, I needed to figure out how to connect immediately with these artists emotionally. A lot of people don't know, but when you work in the music industry, you have to write, it's like a song a day, and you write with strangers and it's a collaborative business. You songwrite with strangers to make a song, right? And these sessions are set up by strangers for strangers usually. And we'll have a major artist in the room, and this major artist is bored usually, or they're on tour, so they took a break, and they could be spending their time relaxing, and staying away from, you can imagine they do music 24 hours. Last thing they want to do is hear more music or talk about more music.
Right.
So, and I would, I get a call from, Jimmy, work with this artist, or Jimmy Iovine and or whomever. And in our business, you live and die by your last record. And that's the business model. I had to deliver every time I was in the studio. So I had to figure this out quick. How do I engage an artist to perform? How do I engage an artist to even care to work with me, right? And here's the hack. The hack is I can sit in a room and play some chords or sing some melodies or, pitch some ideas. And that's the worst thing I can do. Because a lot of artists already see music as a bit of it's a bit of the what's the expression, hair of the dog that bit you?
Yeah, right.
Right?
It's
Because
it's what they want to get away from. Not what
exactly. They live and breathe this lifestyle. What am I doing by pitching them more of this, right? So what I have to do is find a way to remind them of why they do this, right? And it comes back to mission, purpose, driven by empathy, right? And so I ask these questions. And why questions? Well, it's disarming. One, comedians use humor. It's disarming, right? Music is disarming. But I can't use music at this point. So I have to figure something else out. And I realized there's a set of questions I can ask that are genuine, that are delivered genuinely, equally, because, this is micro expressions. You can read right through when it's not honest. So I'll ask something along the lines of, what was your favorite song of all time? Right? And I always get a genuine answer, such as, it was Whitney Houston, it was MJ, it was, Pink Floyd or the Beatles, etc. It was when I first heard that song. And I remember I was with my father, And my father and I never connected except when we heard this one song, right? Or my mother, I didn't get much time to spend with my mother, but this
Yeah,
is
I
an artist
remember
I
when you
shared.
asked me, I was talking about lullabies,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So it can be any kind.
That's right. And what happens, Valerie, you see this, is, you start thinking about when you were there. You cannot help but to remember that. If you're answering, and I expect honesty, I will not tolerate BS because you're wasting both our times.
Right.
When they answer, their brain, like their stage changes, right? Their mental stage changes, and they revert back to that moment. They spark this delusional dream, right, of achieving 0.0001 success opportunity rate, right, as an artist, right? You got to be crazy, right, to do this, right? But that's what you need, that drive. Look at the greatest people of all time.
I think
to be
that's
considered
true
on the edge.
I think that's true for entrepreneurs too, right?
100%. We can back that up with Steve Jobs, etc. Like these stories of these leaders. But so back to engaging an artist. So they'll answer, what's your favorite song of all time? And so back to Whitney, etc. These moments, and all of a sudden they're there now. I've reminded them why they got into this place. So now we're channeling that first instinctual moment of when they saw or saw Whitney perform and sing the song, or when they saw, remind themselves of what they felt when they had that moment. And the world was forever changed at that moment when they were 7 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old, 14, 16, whatever, because the worldview was changed. And by reminding the artist why you got into this in the first place, or just helping an artist evolve their mission, or refresh them with the purpose of why we're here together, that changes the game.
Yeah.
Because now they're fighting for their life. They're fighting for their life of creativity.
I think those questions can be reapplied in a lot of different settings, like, what is your passion about this business idea and why? Or in my line of work, where people change roles a lot, what was your favorite role and why?
That's right.
There's something to disarm folks and get them to open up, because we really are trying to create empathies about connection, and you're really trying to get them to open up. And I found it interesting when we were together in Cincinnati, and Pete was there as well. And you ask that of these non-musicians, right? And you get crazy, stupid answers like from me on lullabies, right? But still meaningful for me. And we had people talking about, strangers, sharing, we had a gentleman share how this one song he played when his preemie baby, who he was afraid was going to die, ended up surviving, and that's his favorite song and why. And then we were able to connect and really start to create. So this point about empathy leading to creativity, I think, is really key. And no matter where you are in your life, whether you're a high school student, whether you're CEO of your own business, whether you're a founder, whether you're assistant, it doesn't matter. You have to be creative in this world, right? This economy requires that kind of creativity. Is there any more? I know Pete's got a few questions coming in, so I'll turn it to him.
Yeah.
But before that, do you want to say any? Oh, sorry, Pete. Do you want to say any more on this empathy and creativity connection?
Yeah, and again, but the reason we're doing this in 4 parts is there's so much to cover, and I want everyone to feel to rest assured that we will keep repeating some of these terms because they're very important. We'll also give out some reading material that I highly recommend. And this reading material is for all ages. I mean, yes, it is, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Wharton, School of Business, etc. required readings, but they really are so critical to being more creative, sustaining creativity, and to be a more, to feel more effectively, right? In other words, to be more empathic, right? And a case in point, Valerie, when we did these co-studies, these sessions with these executives who sit side by side for 30 years, these C-suite executives, CEO, CCO, whatever the case, and they never shared the story of
Right.
their, potentially losing their loved ones. We had
Right.
people in tears because they were finally heard, right? How critical is that? If you give someone the opportunity to be heard, you've changed their lives and changed yours.
Yeah. And I think your point about starting with, and we'll talk about that in some of the other sessions, mental fitness, et cetera, et cetera. You got to start with knowing yourself. And that's a journey that never ends. I have a mom who's going to turn 80. She lost her husband, my father, and she's reinventing herself at 80 years old, right? It never, ever ends. But I know, Pete, you have some questions that have come in.
Hey, look, got a number of questions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. We won't answer all these, but certainly we can get us thinking about the future sessions, but let's see how many we can cover. So one of them, is from Bailey Reinhardt, who asks, as a creator, how do you effectively produce content for others, specifically when they have experiences that are outside of your own? I have experience with surveying and interview users to inform needs and potential solutions of a problem, but how can we increase this empathetic connection of users to our solutions?
Valerie, do you want to start this off? Because I would love to highlight your your economic strength, and your vernacular, and then lead me to answer this question on the creativity side.
Thanks, Fernando. When I think about empathy and I think about users in particular, I think about the first step, and this will sound odd for a money girl to say, money lady, like I am, but you almost have to forget about the economics and you have to sit back and really listen to what the other person is saying and experiencing. And I think that creation is of a new brand or a new product line or a new feature on whatever you're offering is very similar to what I see my boys on a much smaller scale than Fernando. And a few of the people I've gotten to meet that have worked with Fernando have said about creating a song is that it comes from a place that is internal, in that you have to understand the consumer well enough that you're feeling what they're feeling and that you're experiencing it through their eyes, in order to create something that will meet their needs. Now, how it works in a song, of course, I'm sure is a little different, but I think it's also probably more the same than it is different. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is a really good answer. So I'll support this by saying there's a few schools in this thought, right? And one is this Stanford design thinking of, design around the needs of a consumer, right? Of an individual, of a community, a culture. And the first step to this is walking through their situation, right? And feeling their situation. So this is a great story of this team at IDEO, which is this creative consulting agency, design thinking consulting agency, the biggest in the world. And they designed a model for a new lunch line. So students wouldn't be embarrassed to use, whatever assistance from the government to actually eat. So that was a problem. And they sat through and watched how students would approach or not approach the lunch line, right? And through this empathic exchange and experience, they were able to solve and create a new space. And we designed the kitchen and eating environment so there was no shame, but more of an exchange of awareness and empathy towards each other, right? Now, in the new school of customer centricity and individual centricity and needs of understanding human behavior, this is phenomenological, it's a tongue twister, perspective of feeling through experience. So, there's this great book called Sense Making that's really kind of postulates this idea that in order to help and connect with people, whether you're writing a song or whether you're creating a new product or a brand extension, it's understanding the history of the culture of the individual or group of individuals you're working with and trying to help, right? In other words, don't just go live in it, but do some actual background work. Like, what is the culture like? How have they gotten there, right? What was the trail of struggle that allowed the individual or culture to become the way it is, to evolve to the status quo of the culture? So to answer your question, these are two of my favorite schools of thought that where you can apply this empathic model in a real framework. And I suggest, the ideal structure, I suggest the sense-making structure framework to understand.
The other thing I would say is just a very practical application of this is when I travel, and I'm, as you know, the finance lady, so I don't really create new products. I'm not a scientist. I don't market new products. I'm not a marketer, but I'm a leader of our brands. And so whenever I go to a new location, the first thing off the plane is to go into stores and see what our products look like and what it's like to shop our products. And the second thing is to go into consumers' homes. So I've been so fortunate to be in consumers' homes who hand wash only, because that's only what's available, that use bars of soap because they don't have washing machines. I've seen babies' diapers being changed all over the world. And we even take it one step further, that you need to meet their needs, but you need to understand the unarticulated need as well.
That's right.
The only way you can do that, because they don't know what they don't know, right? You're
That's
inventing something new, is to really dig in and understand their experience.
And this is the funnest part, I think, about what this process is, and the most fulfilling part is, just like you enjoy a great movie, there's this amazing feeling you get when you're able to really transcend beyond your current needs to what are the needs of something that's more important, such as hunger, such as social equality, such as these incredible plights that people are going through. Right? That changes everything. You think you have it bad, right? Take a moment in the struggles of someone else.
Yeah.
And to give
Hey,
you
here's
some
another,
perspective.
let me throw another one out that I think will get kind of maybe elicit even more questions. Oh, and by the way, we've mentioned high school students a number of times. We've got a pretty even distribution of, we've got professionals, we got high school students, we have quite a few college students, just in terms of knowing the audience. But one of the questions is, do you agree with the mantra that you need to be heartbroken to experience a surge in creativity? This is a good one.
Yeah, this is a great one. Let me try to debunk this myth, another myth. Okay, so I'll pass this on to you after I'm done with this, Valerie. But this is one of my favorites. You're talking about, when you talk about heartbreak, you just talk about it in the form of what's called a micro trauma, right? It could be macro. It depends what kind of heartbreak you're going through. Now, there's this theory that I highly support, that a lot of creativity and divergent thinking, that means thinking differently, thinking beyond the norm, thinking, esoterically to get to novel ideas, is trauma leads to divergent thinking, right? Or micro trauma leads to new ideas. Now, that is, in my belief, in my studies, true. But at the same time, using empathy, you can inherit someone else's experiences, right? By really connecting with another individual and their plight, right? So in other words, how do famous and extraordinary authors, how are they able to write these stories of struggle when they have not gone through that type of struggle themselves? The answer, in my opinion, is that we all hurt the same, right? Pain is relative, right? Only to your experiences. So to answer your question, no, you don't have to have your heart broken per se, but you can't avoid heartbreak. And I guarantee you've had some form of heartbreak in your life. All you have to do is recall that, right? If you need a driver to articulate a certain narrative for a brand, for a song, for a story, for a photography session, for a film, for a movement in dance, right? Just recall that and imagine that in tenfold for another individual. Let me just clarify that. If you have suffered, know that another individual in front of you might have suffered more, and just channel that. You have a drive, you have instant, or reciprocally, happiness, it's actually equal, or if not higher sometimes, cognitive performer, right? A cognitive function that allows for more creativity equally. So you don't have to suffer to create extraordinary art. I personally perform now when I'm at my happiest. So I make sure I'm in a state of positive thinking in order to perform at my best. Valerie?
This whole conversation, Fernando, leads me to a topic we were talking the other day about what's happening in the world right now with the pandemic, and the fact that we're all finding new ways to connect and do things differently, and how that in and of itself, as hard it is, creates a catalyst for change. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, while we are in this situation and we've been forced to learn to do new things, why can't we move that even further and take that pain, weight, and use that to kind of propel us in a new direction? You know, I have family members that work in, my oldest son writes music for TV shows, and the production stopped, right? So now all of a sudden he has no work, right? And I'm sure that's the case for many people on the call, or school's not in session, and the homework they're giving you is not filling your day, or because you're not living like me, I have so much more time because I'm not living on an airplane the way I was 4 months ago. And so the question is, what are you going to do with that, right? What do you do with that micro trauma, catalyst, whatever?
Okay, so that's a great question, Valerie. Pete, let me just quickly answer this. Let's reframe that, right? Here's a great opportunity to practice another wise psychological intervention. Let's reframe this and look at it as life has given you the ultimate pause button.
Exactly.
To take advantage of reinventing your life's mission, right? Or putting your life mission into actual motion.
Right.
I'm case studying myself right now. I'm probably the biggest introvert, right? I'm a social introvert. And
we don't believe you.
So it took a lot of practice, but I'm throwing myself out there now more than ever, because these topics that we're talking about, and these actionable items that we are giving out, right, are so desperately needed now, right? And so take this moment as the ultimate opportunity. If you ever wish that, I always wanted to be a writer, I've always wanted to be a painter, artist, etc. Well, you've been given the ultimate pause button.
Yeah.
But in realistic, I mean, let's get back to the fundamentals of what's needed to do this. And you should consider that to create a income revenue model for yourself that'll allow you to not think about the economics of getting your art form into motion. Right? We talked about this.
Fernando, let's try to get a couple more questions before we run out of time.
Okay.
Here's another one from Justin Foister. How did you make your personal brand stand out from every other producer out there and songwriter?
You know, I this is what I struggle with, and I know other people struggle with is, I just make music that it moves me, that that pulls on my heartstring, and I know if it does that for me, then it's going to do that for other people. And so that's, I guess that's kind of a telltale tone of my brand, of the Garibay music that I make, along with the Garibay Center, which is my company that accelerates growth for executives, academics, and artists.
Why don't you tell them about some of the things like your microphone there? That's part of your brand. And white. Tell them why you have white.
Okay, so
why that makes sense to you, because I think
Yeah.
that's part of your brand as well.
Yeah, so everything, it's a bit calculated, and here's why. Everything is what I call purposeful. For me, my main driver is aligned with, the ideas of what drives, action, what drives people, and that's mission and purpose and story, right? The story you tell yourself. So I know personally, I take my, what some would consider handicaps or mental, deficiencies or whatever, dyslexia, I have, ADHD, all these kind of amazing, I call them gifts, because one, I realized that, my synesthetic, way of seeing the world, synesthesia, when I see color, I hear music. And that would drive me crazy, because when I was young, I thought I was hearing voices. And what I realized, it's color that affects me. So I try to limit my color input, and to create a space where I can be ultimately creative and more creative. And I get to choose where I want to focus my creativity, as opposed to my environment choosing for me. That's one. Two is, if I'm going to communicate my message to you, I want to make sure I have the most optimum tools to do that. So my microphone is a 1969 U47 Neumann. Why not? Right? I can do that, right? So my audience you deserve to hear me as clearly as possible. You see, my purpose is in everything I do. It's purposeful. It's mission driven. I think that what connects. When you talk to people, who have extraordinary brands, not saying that my brand is extraordinary, but I know my thinking is, and I know my will and my approach and the purpose behind it is authentic enough that it cuts through.
And I think that's what's so key, and your purposefulness. You've thought about your brand, and you thought about it for what works for you. So it's very authentic. But anyway, as an outsider, that's what I see out for you.
Likewise, Valerie, and the same for you as well. I mean, this is why we're so comfortable speaking about this, because we go through the same experiences, and as leaders and as students at the same time, don't we?
Yep.
Pete, any more questions?
I think we're hitting our time. Catherine's gonna have a few final notes, but huge thanks to both of you. We covered a lot of ground, and there's more to come. So for those that are listening, I assume we won't get to all the questions. We will. This is gonna be a bit of a journey, but Catherine, what should we know before we sign off?
One thing, may I add, sorry to interrupt, but I want to give the audience a little gift, and that is one of the books that I recommend to my mentees. And this is from hundreds of books that I've gone through, and I believe makes an impact, is Sean Akers' The Positive Advantage, and Jocko Willink's book on extreme ownership. So I do audiobooks because I am dyslexic, and it's my hack, and this has helped me so much. So this is my gift to the audience, as well as I hope the next conversations we could take more questions, because I really want to engage with the audience and answer any burning questions. And that's why we're here.
Yeah, and if you can keep the questions, Pete, so that we can have them for our next session, which will be on tactical wellness, but also with the overview of empathy. And Fernando, I thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and knowledge with us. It's greatly, greatly needed, and it's really, really important. So we appreciate it.
Likewise, Valerie, I'm so grateful. And please, we can take some questions as well on Instagram. Valerie, you can find Valerie in my Instagrams, Fernando Garibay Instagram. Just look for it, and Valerie is always tagged, so you can find her. Val, do you want to give your Instagram out?
This is
Valerie Shepherd. Valerie Shepherd.
About my brand. I think it's Valerie.
We'll
So
get that information
from Fernando.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I think this was maybe the most interactive session yet in terms of questions. So we'll be sure to address those in the future. And I dropped a couple links in the chat to register for the 3 upcoming sessions this summer, as well as a little promo for our other major conference coming up in July, our Cintrifuse presentation of the P&G signal. So for those who aren't part of our student program, please check that out, register for those sessions. We've got about a dozen really great interactive workshops for you. So thanks again for attending today, and looking forward to seeing you all in the future.
What a blast.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I look forward to the
Bye.
next one. Bye.
Bye.